All right, so we can go ahead in the BEA data and we can take a look at these things. Unfortunately, we don't have any data past 2020, which is sad. But if you also wanted to go past that, you can always just look in your textbook, because the textbook does have graphs starting at 1960 up to 2015. But if you wanted some more recent data than that, you can definitely go ahead and go into these interactive tables and look at them. Right? We can take a look at okay, this is what the consumption was over time. Right? It was around $14 trillion, since this is all billions of dollars over here. And we can take a look at the net exports and see that, yeah, it's usually, about, negative $1 trillion of the 20, trillion dollar GDP or so that we have, right? Our GDP hovers around, $20 trillion. And if we're curious about any of this stuff, we can always click into some of the more minute categories, right? If we wanted to look at personal consumption, let's take away GDP. If we wanted to look at consumption and look at our spending on goods and our spending on services, we could see, oh, we spend quite a bit more on services than we do on goods here in the United States. If we wanted to just look at goods and take a look at what do we spend on durable goods compared to non-durable goods, right? Whereas durable goods are talking about any kind of good that's expected to last longer than a year or something like that, right? So a car, a refrigerator, something like that. Non-durable goods, so durable goods are down here in the red. So these are all, long-lasting goods that don't get worn out as easily. Non-durable goods, this is going to be food, clothing, toilet paper, all that other kind of stuff, right? So obviously we're spending more on, consumables in terms of non-durable consumables than we are durable consumables, just because of the way that we are as humans, right? And the fact that we need food to eat and we need new clothing, but we don't necessarily always need a new car, refrigerator, toaster, so on and so forth. Services are, intangible products, right? So it's you don't get anything at the end of the day. The only thing that you have to prove that you actually spent some money is a receipt and an experience, right? So entertainment, healthcare, or education, right? These are all services. When we talk about investment, one of the important things for us to talk about when we're talking about investment is the fact that this is not just business investment, right? The fixed investment we have that's non-residential, but we also have any new housing starts. So any kind of new home construction is included in the I part of our GDP equation instead of in the C part of our GDP equation, which students always find very frustrating. Part of it is to think about is that, a house is an investment, right? You can resell that compared to, yeah, a car is kind of an investment, but, it doesn't hold its value like a house, right? Refrigerators, again, don't hold their values like houses. So but the other thing to keep in mind is that this is only new construction. So if I resell a house, that doesn't add to GDP, right? And that comes back to what is our original definition of GDP? It's the value of all final goods and services. So reselling stuff. So if you buy all your clothes from a thrift store, none of that purchasing is adding to GDP. GDP is only new stuff being sold. If you buy used books, none of that's being added to GDP. So it's only new final goods and services. Any kind of resold goods and services is not going to add to GDP. The other one that kind of gets students a lot is this weird change in private inventories. And we see that sometimes this is positive and sometimes it's negative, right? So when it's negative, that means that I sold more than I produced that year. So I had to draw down on my inventories. Does that make sense? When it's positive, that means that I produced more than I sold that year. And so since I couldn't put those production, since I couldn't record that economic activity in terms of production, I have to, because I didn't sell all of the stuff, I have to record it as a buildup in my private inventory. So, if a firm has, a bunch of extra Xboxes that they didn't sell or something like that, this would be their change in private inventory. And then maybe the next year, if they, sold way more than the Xboxes than they, could produce, and they had to dip into their inventory, then it would be a negative value for the change in the private inventories there. And last but not least, and I'll let y'all go, talking about exports and imports, right? So exports are any goods and services that we produce that people outside of the United States consume, right? And we can see for the most part that a lot of our exports are goods. They're not necessarily services. Part of that just has to do with the fact that, like, how can you get a haircut from someone in a different country? You can't, right? There are some services that you have to be physically present for, whereas goods, you can ship goods all over the world, right? And if we look at the imports, we can see that we import way more goods than we import services, right? A lot of this is, clothing from East Asian countries, plastic and electronics from, East Asian countries and stuff like that, metals and food from, Europe and Africa and other places like that, so on and so forth, right? But at the end of the day, when we take a look at both of these things, we can see that, our imports are consistently higher than our exports, which is the reason why when we click in this net exports, that value is always negative there. All right, I will see you all on Friday. We will have class on Friday. I will put recordings of it on YouTube. If you cannot make it, you have 2 drops in this class, and you can always earn a new one by getting a get-out-of-jail-free card. And I hope you all have a great week.